My name is Lydia Marsh. I was 37 years old the morning my parents kicked me out of a house they had never owned. It was the Saturday of Memorial Day weekend in Davenport, Iowa, and I had just come home from a 12-hour overnight shift at St. Agnes Community Hospital. My shoes were still damp from the rain outside the emergency entrance. My badge was still clipped to my sweater. I smelled like disinfectant, vending machine coffee, and the kind of exhaustion that settles behind your eyes when you have spent the whole night keeping other people's paperwork from becoming someone else's tragedy. My mother was waiting at the kitchen table. Janine Marsh had arranged herself like she was chairing a family meeting, both hands folded beside a yellow folder. My father, Wayne, stood near the back door holding my old duffel bag. He would not look at me. My sister Piper leaned against the counter, with her phone already angled in her hand, and her boyfriend, Colton Vance, stood by the staircase, studying the living room like he was already deciding which walls to paint white. On the table was a printed bill. Family occupancy debt, $18,750. I stared at the number, too tired at first to understand it. My mother slid the paper toward me with 2 fingers. You've lived here long enough, Lydia. This family has carried you for years. I looked around the kitchen. My grandfather had eaten breakfast in every morning, until his hands got too weak to butter toast. The same kitchen where I had crushed his pills, labeled his cabinets, and learned the sound of his clock ticking slower than the rest of the world. You can sign it, my mother said, or you can leave before the guests arrive. I did not scream. I did not beg. I walked upstairs, took the old tin watch box my grandfather left me, and stepped out of their house. 3 hours later, a bank manager looked me in the eyes and said, "Miss Marsh, that house has never belonged to them. Please subscribe to support the channel." I bet you're watching this video right now while lying down with your legs crossed, right? If that's true, type 3. If not, type 4. Let's see whether I got it right. Alright, enough talking. Let's begin the story. 2 days after I walked into Riverbend Community Bank with rain-damp shoes and my grandfather's tin box in my hands, Alma Keene told me not to go back to Wren Hollow Lane myself. She had reviewed the trust before noon, made 2 phone calls, and said the safest thing I could do was let paper speak before my mother had another chance to turn my voice into something ugly. So on the first business day after Memorial Day, while I sat in a corner booth at a diner 3 blocks from the hospital, a woman named Nadine Brooks walked up the porch steps of 1126 Wren Hollow Lane, with a sealed envelope in one hand and a body camera clipped to her navy jacket. I know the details because Alma emailed me the service affidavit later that afternoon. My mother opened the door at 2:11 p.m., with her public smile already in place. There were women from her church group in the kitchen, eating potato salad from my grandmother's glass bowl. Piper had arranged lemon bars on a white tray for a lifestyle reel, and Colton's shoes were near the stairs because he had been measuring the hallway for what he called a better visual flow. Nadine asked for Janine Marsh. My mother said, "That's me," in the bright voice she used for clients, pastors, and anyone she wanted to impress. Nadine handed her the envelope. "You are being served with a 30-day notice to vacate on behalf of the property owner of record." My mother looked down at the first page. Then she looked back up, still smiling, but the smile had gone thin at the edges. "There must be a mistake," she said. "This is my father's house." Nadine did not argue. She did not soften her voice either. "The owner of record is Lydia Marsh." That was the first time my name entered that house with legal weight behind it. According to the affidavit, my mother laughed once. Not because anything was funny, but because laughter was what she used when reality refused to obey her. Then she tore the notice in half in front of Nadine, in front of the church ladies, and in front of Piper's phone, which had been recording from the counter. Nadine only touched the small camera on her jacket. "Service is complete, ma'am," she said. "Tearing the paper does not stop the clock." That sentence stayed with me. The clock. My grandfather would have liked that. From that moment, my mother had 30 days to leave the house. She had already promised Piper and Colton they could turn into a business. 30 days to pack the dishes she never washed when my grandfather was sick. 30 days before paperwork did what I had never been allowed to do out loud. But to understand why those papers mattered, you have to understand the man who taught me that broken things still keep time. He taught me that when I was 16, on a Sunday afternoon in March, the kind of afternoon Iowa gives you when winter is technically over but still standing in the doorway, refusing to leave. My grandfather's name was Emmett Vale, and his shop sat on Brady Street between a dry cleaner and a flower store that changed owners every 2 years. Vale, Time and Repair had a green awning, a bell over the door, and a front window full of clocks that never agreed with one another. Some were 5 minutes fast, some were 7 minutes slow. One old regulator clock near the back had not shown the correct hour since 1998, and Grandpa refused to fix it. "Not everything has to be useful to be worth keeping," he told me once. That day, he set a pocket watch on the workbench in front of me. The case was scratched. The glass had a thin crack running through the 12. The hands were stopped at 2:17. "Dead?" I asked. He slid his magnifier down over one eye and looked at me like I had insulted the watch personally. "Quiet," he said. "Not dead." I remember that because, at 16, quiet was the word people used for me when they wanted to make neglect sound polite. Quiet girl, easy girl. Doesn't need much, doesn't ask, doesn't cause trouble. My mother liked that version of me. It cost her nothing. Grandpa opened the back of the watch and turned it carefully under the lamp. Inside were tiny wheels, screws no bigger than seeds, and one spring curled tight as a secret. He handed me tweezers and told me to breathe through my nose. "Hands shake when the heart is too loud," he said, "so slow the heart down first." I spent 2 hours learning to remove one damaged screw, 2 hours for something smaller than a freckle. When it finally lifted free, I expected him to clap or tease me or say I had taken long enough. He only nodded. "There," he said, "now it can move again." 3 weeks later, after a Sunday dinner where my mother praised Piper's new staging internship for 20 minutes and then told my aunt I had no rhythm for success, Grandpa called me back into the shop. He did not mention what she said. He never wasted words repeating cruelty. The repaired watch was waiting in a small tin box lined with dark blue cloth. He placed it in my hands like it weighed more than metal. Inside the cover, he had engraved 5 words. "For Lydia, never late." I thought he was being kind. I did not know he had already started measuring the distance between what my family called me and what he was quietly preparing me to become. That was how Grandpa loved people. He did not argue with the name someone else gave you. He built something sturdier beside it and waited for you to notice. The house on Wren Hollow Lane was the same way. From the street, it looked ordinary enough. A red brick 2-story with black shutters, a narrow porch, and a maple tree that dropped more leaves than any one person could reasonably rake. A listing agent would have called it 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, finished basement, detached garage. My mother would later call it an asset. Colton would call it a conversion opportunity. But before anyone turned it into numbers, it had been my grandfather's life laid out in wood, brass, and stubborn patience. He bought the lot in 1976, back when that part of Davenport still had more cornfields than cul-de-sacs. He used to say the bank approved him because the loan officer liked his posture, not his income. The truth was probably less romantic, but I never corrected him. Grandpa needed certain stories to stay polished. He repaired half the house himself and hired help only when something required a permit. The kitchen cabinets were walnut, not because walnut was trendy, but because a customer once paid him with leftover boards after a restaurant remodel. The staircase rail had a slight dip near the 6th step where his hand had worn it down over decades. The dining table had one mismatched leg because he made the first 3 before realizing he had measured wrong, then kept the mistake because Grandma laughed too hard when she saw it. After my grandmother died, my parents moved in to help. That was the word my mother used, help. But in that house, help usually meant me. I was 29 then, working nights at the hospital and pretending I was only stopping by for dinner. Then, dinner became pill organizers. Pill organizers became laundry. Laundry became sleeping on the couch because Grandpa had wandered into the hallway at 3:00 a.m., looking for a clock he had sold 20 years earlier. He never thanked me in the way people expect. He did not say, "You are such a good granddaughter." He would just leave coffee ready in the old percolator or set aside the heel of the bread because he knew I liked it toasted dark. Once, after a double shift, I fell asleep at the kitchen table and woke with his flannel jacket over my shoulders, the old wall clock clicking above the sink, always a little behind the world, and never ashamed of it. "Should I fix that?" I asked him. He looked at the clock, then at me. "No," he said. "This house doesn't need to keep up with anybody." I believed him then. I wish I had remembered it sooner. I started remembering it in the months after he died, when the house began changing without moving an inch. Grandpa passed in late October of 2023, just after the first hard frost silvered the grass along Wren Hollow Lane. He was 81. The morning after the funeral, my mother stood in his kitchen wearing one of Grandma's aprons and told a cousin, "Dad would want this place to stay useful." I was at the sink, washing casserole dishes people had dropped off and would probably never come back to collect. The word caught in my ear. Useful. Not loved. Not protected. Useful. Before he died, she called it Dad's house. After the funeral, she called it the family home. By Christmas, it had become the property. By spring, it was the opportunity. The first folder appeared in April. Blue plastic, tucked under the phone book in the junk drawer, like hiding something under a phone book made sense in a house where nobody under 50 used one anymore. I was looking for tape to seal a box of Grandpa's old repair manuals when I saw the tab. Wren Hollow Estimate. I should have closed the drawer. I didn't. Inside was a printed valuation from a local agent. Estimated market range, $489,000 to $512,000. Below that were notes in my mother's handwriting. Short-term rental, event weekends, corporate stays, Piper content series. Under the estimate was Colton Vance's business card, glossy and stiff, like he had ordered 1,000 of them before he had sold a single house. Across the back, he had written, "Original character cells. Need cleaner story." I stood there with the roll of tape in my hand and felt something quiet inside me tighten. Cleaner story. I knew what that meant before anyone said it out loud. The house could keep Grandpa's staircase, Grandpa's clocks, Grandpa's walnut cabinets, but not his hospital bed, not the pill schedule taped to the refrigerator, not the granddaughter sleeping on the couch between night shifts. Not me. A week later, Colton walked through the living room, filming corners with his phone. "This place has real potential," he said. "Not to me, not really, but it needs emotional repositioning." My mother nodded like he had said something wise. That night, I heard them in the kitchen while I stood barefoot in the hallway. Piper wanted August for the renovation reveal. Colton said they needed me out before filming started. My mother did not sound surprised. "She has no money," Janine said. "She'll cry, but she'll go. Lydia always goes where she's told." That was the first time I understood she was not waiting for me to leave. She was designing the moment I would be forced to. The strange thing about being pushed out is that it rarely happens all at once. People imagine a slammed door, a shouted sentence, a bag thrown onto a porch. Those things happen, yes, but by the time they do, the leaving has usually been arranged in smaller ways, quiet ways, ways that sound reasonable if you only hear them one at a time. For me, it started after Grandpa was gone, when every room seemed to ask who belonged there now. When Grandpa was alive, cruelty had to lower its voice. After he died, nobody bothered whispering. What had been a folder in April became furniture in May. My mother moved her nail supplies into the breakfast nook because the light was better there. Piper brought in rolling racks of throw pillows, thrifted lamps, and fake plants for what she called visual testing. Colton taped little paper labels to door frames, not with names, but with ideas. Primary suite, guest experience, content corner. Nobody put a label on the room where I had slept on and off for years, when Grandpa needed me nearby. I was still working nights at the hospital. I would come home at 7, 20 inches the morning, park beside Colton's leased SUV, and find Piper's friends, Colton's contractor buddies, and women from my mother's church, walking through the hallway with coffee cups, talking about sightlines and rental appeal. My father would sit on the back porch in his old work jacket, pretending not to hear any of it. Wayne Marsh had perfected the art of being present without being responsible. He did not make the cruel plans. He did not stop them either. When my mother said, "Lydia, move your things out of the downstairs closet. Piper needs it for staging inventory," he looked at the lawn. When Colton said my grandfather's old recliner ruined the room's balance, my father rubbed his knee and said nothing. Silence was his signature on everything. The only person who said what everyone else avoided was Eileen Carver, the retired teacher next door. She came over one afternoon with banana bread wrapped in foil and found me carrying Grandpa's boxes to the basement. "Your grandfather would hate this," she said. I looked toward the kitchen, where my mother was laughing too loudly. "He isn't here," I told her. Eileen's face softened. "No, but I am." I did not understand what she meant then. Later, I would. By early May, my mother had stopped asking me to move things and started telling me what was no longer mine to use. The laundry room after 6. The good parking spot. The back bedroom. The porch swing Grandpa built. Each rule was small enough to sound reasonable by itself. Together, they formed a map, and every line on it pointed me toward the door. By the Friday night before Memorial Day weekend, the map had become so obvious I could almost see the lines on the floor. They wanted me out before the barbecue, before Piper's first renovation video, before Colton could walk strangers through the house and sell them a story that did not have me in it. I came home from the hospital at 11:40 p.m., after picking up an extra half shift. The house was mostly dark, except for the kitchen, where my mother's voice slipped through the doorway in that careful whisper she used when she thought secrecy made her decent. "She needs to be gone by Monday," Colton said. "If she's still here when we film, people are going to ask questions." My mother made a small sound, not quite a laugh. "Nobody asks questions about Lydia." Piper said something I could not hear. Then my mother answered clearly. "She has no money, no husband, no plan. Let her believe that. People like Lydia don't fight paperwork because paperwork scares them." I stood in the hallway with my hand still on my hospital bag. That was the sentence that sent me upstairs. I did not pack. Not then. I did not call anyone. I sat on the edge of my bed and pulled Grandpa's tin watch box from the bottom drawer of my nightstand. I had kept it there for years, under old pay stubs and birthday cards I never threw away because they had his handwriting on them. The lid resisted at first, like it had been waiting so long it had forgotten how to open. Inside was the pocket watch he had repaired when I was 16, wrapped in blue cloth. Beneath it was something I had never seen before, a small brass key, a business card, and a folded piece of cream paper. The card read, "Calvin Mercer, Riverbend Community Bank." On the back, in Grandpa's narrow writing, was a 6-digit number and one sentence, "Tell Calvin you are ready." My fingers felt cold before I even unfolded the paper. There were only 3 lines. "When they make you leave, come back with paper. Alma has the house. Calvin has the account." Eileen saw enough. I read those lines until the words stopped looking like words and started looking like a door. The next morning, after my mother put that fake debt on the kitchen table and my father carried my bag to the door, I did not fight them because I finally understood something. They had planned a scene. Grandpa had left me an exit, and for the first time in my life, I knew exactly where to go. I drove to Riverbend Community Bank with the tin box on the passenger seat and my hospital bag in the trunk because my father had thrown it there like luggage from a stranger's car. I remember the road more clearly than I remember my own breathing. The holiday flags were already up along the riverfront, red and blue snapping in the wind, and people were buying charcoal and burger buns like the whole city had agreed to pretend that families were simple things. Calvin Mercer did not pretend. The teller took one look at the business card, then at the number on the back, and asked me to wait. Less than a minute later, a man in a gray suit came out of the glass office near the safe deposit rooms. He was almost 60, with careful hands, and the kind of voice people use around hospital beds and courtrooms. "Miss Marsh," he said, not like a question. "Please bring the box." Inside his office, he closed the door, but did not lock it. I appreciated that. My family had taught me to notice exits. He opened a file with my grandfather's name on the tab, then called Alma Keene on speaker. Her voice came through clear and dry. "Lydia," she said, "your grandfather was very specific. If you came to Calvin with the watch box, we were to assume the situation had become urgent." I looked down at my phone. It had already started. 4 missed calls from my mother. 2 from Piper. 1 text from Colton. "You're making this harder than it has to be." Then another from my mother. "Come back before people arrive. We can still handle this privately." Then Piper posted a story. I did not open it, but the preview showed enough. My duffel bag by the porch, a caption about, "When someone refuses accountability." Calvin slid the first page toward me. The trust had been created in 2019. The house at 1126 Wren Hollow Lane had been transferred into it before my mother ever found the first estimate, before Colton ever said conversion opportunity, before Piper ever imagined turning my grandfather's hallway into content. Emmett Vale had retained the right to live there until he died. After that, the property passed to me. No probate. No vote. No family meeting. Just paper. Alma explained the rest. The repair account had $119,400 in it. The watch collection and tools had been appraised at $74,000. The old pickup was worth $13,800. The house, conservatively, was just over $500,000. All my life, they had called me broke. On paper, I was reading the price of their mistake. I did not go back to Wren Hollow Lane that night. Alma said it twice, once on the speakerphone in Calvin's office, and again after I called her from my car. "Do not return to that house alone," she told me. "Not because you are weak, because people who are losing control like to create witnesses before they create truth." So I checked into a motel off Elmore Avenue, the kind with beige curtains, a vending machine that hummed too loudly, and a front desk clerk who did not ask why a 37-year-old woman with a hospital badge was paying cash for one night and carrying a tin box like it held a heart. The room smelled like bleach and old carpet. I set Grandpa's pocket watch on the nightstand, then placed the trust papers beside it. Metal and paper, time and proof. 2 things my family had always underestimated. My phone kept lighting up. My mother first. "You embarrassed me today." Then Piper. "Mom is crying. I hope you're happy." Then Colton. Polite in the way men are polite when they think calmness makes them superior. "Lydia, this can still be handled reasonably. Don't let some lawyer turn you against your own family." I almost laughed at that. Not because it was funny. Because for the first time, I could see the shape of their fear. They were not afraid I had changed. They were afraid I had learned where the exits were. At 8:14 p.m., Alma called. "I have the notice prepared," she said. 30 days. It will be served on the first business day after the holiday. Nadine Brooks will handle it. She wears a camera. She does not get rattled. I sat on the edge of the motel bed with my shoes still on. "What if they say I'm cruel?" I asked. Alma was quiet for a moment. "Then let them," she said. "Paperwork does not break a family, Lydia. It records where the break already happened." I looked at Grandpa's watch. The second hand moved in small, stubborn ticks. Alma sent the authorization form to my email. I opened it on my phone. My thumb hovered above the signature box longer than it should have. Some small, trained part of me still wanted permission. From my mother. From my father. From the version of myself that had survived by staying agreeable. Then I remembered the note in the tin box. "When they make you leave, come back with paper." I signed. No speech, no slammed door, no witness but a motel lamp, and an old watch that had once been called dead. In the morning, Nadine would knock. In the morning, I expected to feel different after signing. Lighter, maybe. Cleaner. Instead, I woke up in the motel with the same heaviness in my chest and a message from Alma waiting on my phone. Service is scheduled for 2 p.m. Do not engage if they contact you. I went to work because that was what I knew how to do. People imagine big days announce themselves with music, but mine came with discharge forms, ringing phones, and a man in room 214 asking whether his insurance would cover a walker. At 1:57, I stepped into the stairwell with a paper cup of water and watched the minute change. At Hollow Lane, Piper had already built her stage. I saw the video later because Alma's office saved everything. Piper had set a ring light near the dining room arch and propped her phone against a stack of design books. Colton stood beside an easel with paint samples clipped across the top. On the first page of his presentation, in large beige letters, he had written, "The Wren House Project. Restoring Family Legacy." That phrase almost made me laugh. Family legacy, apparently, required removing the one person who had known where Grandpa kept the spare hearing aid batteries. Piper smiled into the camera like she was hosting a morning show. "This is the first official day of turning my grandfather's old home into something beautiful again," she said. My mother stood behind her in a soft blue blouse, nodding with the humble expression she used when she wanted people to mistake control for grace. My father was not in frame, but I saw his reflection in the dark glass of the china cabinet. Sitting, watching, doing nothing. Then the doorbell rang. Colton looked annoyed first, like interruption was something poor planning caused. Piper kept recording. My mother smoothed the front of her blouse and walked to the door. Nadine Brooks stood on the porch, professional and still, holding an envelope that did not care about lighting, angles, or legacy language. The camera caught my mother's smile thinning when she read the first page. It caught Piper whispering, "Mom, what is that?" It caught Colton stepping forward, then stopping when Nadine glanced at the body camera on her jacket. And it caught the moment my mother said, too sharply, "Lydia has no authority here." Nadine's answer was calm enough to hurt. The records say otherwise. That was the first crack in the performance. Not a shout, not a scandal. Just one sentence, placed exactly where my family had built a lie. Records turned out to be the one language my mother could not charm, shame, or pray her way around. For the first week, she treated the notice like a misunderstanding with bad manners. She sent Alma 9 emails, each one longer than the last. The first called the situation a painful family confusion. The third used the phrase elder influence, as if Grandpa had somehow been manipulated by the granddaughter who changed his bedsheets and drove him to cardiology appointments. By the 9th, she was writing in capital letters. Alma forwarded none of them to me until I asked. When she did, she added only one sentence: "You do not have to answer noise." My mother hired a lawyer named Brandon Sykes, whose office was between a vape shop and a tax refund place in Bettendorf. He lasted 2 days. Alma said he requested the trust, the deed, the tax records, and the title policy on a Wednesday morning. By Friday afternoon, he had called Janine and told her there was no claim to make, no ownership interest, no lease, no adverse possession, no beneficiary status. Nothing. My mother's response was to tell people at church that I had found a loophole. That word reached me through Eileen. She said, "You stole your own inheritance with paperwork," Eileen told me over the phone. I looked at Grandpa's watch on the motel nightstand. That sounds like her. The 30 days passed slowly. Then all at once, they did not leave. Of course they didn't. My mother had spent her life believing consequences were things that happened to people who lacked confidence. On the 31st day, Alma filed the possession case at the Scott County Courthouse. The hearing was set for the following week. I did not sit near them in court. Janine wore cream and carried tissues she never used. Piper came in sunglasses, though the courtroom had no bright windows. My father sat beside them with both hands folded between his knees, staring at the floor as if it might open and offer him a more honest life. The judge read quietly for several minutes. Trust, deed, notice. Service affidavit. No lease, no payment history, no ownership claim. Then she looked up. Mrs. Marsh, she said, being the daughter of the previous occupant does not make you the owner of the property. My mother opened her mouth. The judge lifted one hand. The owner of record is Lydia Marsh. Possession is granted. That was it. No thunder, no applause. Just a gavel, a date, and my mother's face losing the last of its performance. The lockout was scheduled for Monday, August 12, at 9:30 inches the morning. Alma called me afterward and said, "You do not need to be there." So I wasn't, but Piper was. And this time, when she turned on her camera, the house finally told the truth without me inside it. Piper's final video began with her whispering, "They're here," like the sheriff had arrived to perform for her instead of enforce a court order. I saw it later, saved by Alma's paralegal before Piper deleted it. The camera was crooked, the porch railing cut across the frame. You could see my father standing near the front steps in the same brown work jacket he had worn for 15 years, his shoulders rounded like something inside him had finally stopped holding him up. My mother stood behind him with one hand pressed to her throat. Colton was not there. A deputy from Scott County read the order in a calm voice. He gave them time to gather what they needed. 30 minutes. Medications. Identification. Essential items. Anything else would be inventoried and arranged for pickup. My mother tried to speak over him twice. The third time, Wayne touched her arm and said, "Janine, stop." It was the first time I had ever heard him use her name like a boundary. Piper lowered the phone when the locksmith changed the front lock, but not before the camera caught my father looking at the house and saying, almost too softly to hear, "We were living in hers." That clip traveled farther than Piper intended. Within a week, her brand deals went quiet. Colton sent her a text she screenshotted by accident before deleting her account. This is not the kind of exposure I need. My mother's church group stopped meeting in person for a season. Wayne mailed me a letter in a plain white envelope. It said, in his careful block handwriting, "I did not protect you. Silence was easier than courage. I am sorry. I read it once. Then I put it in a drawer. Forgiveness, I learned, is not the same as access." I went back to Wren Hollow Lane on a Thursday morning in September. Eileen Carver met me on the porch with a thermos of coffee and the new keys in her palm. She did not hug me until I reached for her first. Inside, the house was emptier than I remembered. The walls had pale rectangles where pictures used to hang. The dining room smelled faintly of dust and lemon cleaner. The old clock above the sink was still running, still a little behind the world. In Grandpa's workroom, I found one drawer stuck. I had to pull it twice before it gave. Inside was another pocket watch, wrapped in blue cloth. This one had never been used. On the inside cover, he had engraved a sentence I had not known I needed. "For Lydia, you were never late." They were. I sat on the floor and cried quietly. Not because I had won, but because someone had loved me years in advance. That night, I hung the brass key beside the back door, wound the old clock, and closed the house behind me. Not to keep everyone out, just to decide who was allowed back in. What Lydia's story teaches us is that sometimes the people who call themselves family are not measuring love, they are measuring usefulness. They love the version of you that stays quiet, pays the bill, keeps the peace, watches the house, absorbs the insult, and never asks who is protecting you in return. But love is not supposed to be a debt collector. Real love does not keep a hidden ledger of every meal, every room, every favor, every mistake. Real love does not wait until you are tired and alone to remind you how little power you have. Real love does not throw you out and then call you cruel for finding a door back to yourself. Lydia's grandfather understood something her parents never did. He knew protection is not always loud. Sometimes protection is a signed document in a folder. Sometimes it is a key in a tin box. Sometimes it is a clock repaired years before anyone else believes it can run again. Sometimes love is not the person who rescues you in the storm. It is the person who quietly builds shelter long before the weather changes. And maybe that is the deeper lesson here. You are not worthless because someone treated you like an inconvenience. You are not weak because you stayed quiet to survive. You are not late because it took you years to understand what was happening. Healing has its own timing. Courage has its own clock. There comes a moment when you stop begging people to see your value and start honoring the people who already did. Lydia did not win because she became cruel. She won because she finally stopped handing her life back to people who only knew how to take. Family should be a place where your name is safe. But when it is not, you are allowed to build boundaries. You are allowed to close the door, not out of hatred, but out of peace. If this story touched something in you, leave a comment below. Have you ever been treated like the responsible one, only when people needed something from you? I would really like to hear your thoughts. And if you want more stories about family, betrayal, resilience, and finding your way home, please like this video and subscribe. Your support helps this story reach someone who may need it tonight.